just to end with one short ha'ara, and this is really a ha'ara that was left on the table last week, and it's mamish pashit. It's so pashit, I'm like afraid to call it a raid bite, but it's very, very simple. It's a ha'ara, and I just think it's kedai to mention. So the first sugya in Mesechtes Menachos, like the first sugya in Mesechtes Zvachim, was the sugya of Shaloi Lishma. And really, like all things Menachos versus Zvachim, in Zvachim we get the longer version of it, and Menachos we get the abbreviated version of it. But the very first sugya is the halach of Shaloi Lishma. Right, how does it relate to a mincha? Kol ha-minachos shenikmetzu shaloi l'shman ksheros, ela shaloi olu l'bayim l'shem chayva. Chutz minchas chayta, minchas kanos, where over there the halach is, if you had a machshava apiselas of shinu koyta, shinu bailim, so there the halach is it's even going to be possible. In the course of the sugyas, we saw Shitas Rav Shimon, right, that was a big topic of the first and second daf, and then we saw the Shita of Rab and Reish Lakish and Rava regarding the minchas ha'omer, that was a big topic of the third, the fourth, and the fifth daf, right, but very much sugyas related to shaloi l'shma. Rashi on Daf Beis Amud Beis in Mesechtes Menachos says, quote, it's Dibra Maschel Avol Machshava de Minkara Hach Machshava de Kachim, as it relates to Machshava Hapeiselas by Kachim Haitzah as דיבור bepeho. The Machshava has to be with the Kohen actually saying out of his mouth the thing that he's not supposed to say. So Zok Rashi, the word machshava in the context of bad machshavas and kachim is a little bit of a misnomer. The reason it's a little bit of a misnomer because really, if all the kohen did was have a bad thought of shaloi lishma, that in and of itself would not render the carbon pasul. That would not render the carbon pasul. How would the carbon become pasul? Only if he expressed verbally, orally, with words, this bad thought that he's having. And Rashi says that it's not just true for Shaloi Lishma, the Sugya Sha'al Zeh Onu Danen, but Hach Machshava the Kachim. It's true for all Machshavas. Be it a Machshava Shaloi Lishma, be it a Machshava of Pigel, Chutz Zmani, Chutz Mkoimai, or some of the other Machshavas that come up in different Sugyas. But all Machshavas of Kachim, Zak Rashi, has to be B'dibur. Rashi says the same exact Chiddush in Mesechtes Zvachim, in Perek Beishamai and Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis. It's in the middle of a Rashi. Rashi says, "V'chol machshava de kachim moitzi bepehu." Every single time you find the idea of a machshava bekachim, it's something that has to be expressed bepeh. The truth is that this Chiddush of Rashi, that machshavas of kachim have to be bepeh, is not only Rashi's shita, it's Tosfos' shita as well. As a matter of fact, Tosfos in Zvachim daf Beis Amud Aleph, Tosfos in Zvachim daf Daled Amud Beis, Tosfos in Mesechtes Bava Metzia daf Mem Gimel Amud Beis, Tosfos in Perek Tamid Nishchat Pesachim daf Samach Gimel, Tosfos in Mesechtes Chulin daf Lamed Tes. In all of these places and more, Tosfos says verbatim what Rashi says, that every single time you find the inyan of a machshava Hapeiselas by Kachim, you should know the word machshava is really a misnomer. It's something that needs to be spoken out b'dibur. It's a very big chiddush, right? I mean, one of the big themes of Kachim is the bad thoughts, and it turns out it's not even a bad thought. That's not the nakuda. The nakuda is it's bad speech. It's something that would have to be speaking out bal peh. The Mishnah Melech in Hilchos Psuli HaMikdashim, the beginning of Perek Yud Gimel, he's medayek from the Stimas Lashon HaRambam throughout his Yad Chazaka, that the Rambam couldn't have held that way. The Rambam, when he introduces the concept of bad machshavas, so the Rambam says, Perek Gimel Halacha Aleph, Shalosh machshavos saying shepoislin as hakarbonos, ve'elu hein, machshavas shinei Hashem, machshavas hamakam, u'machshavas hazman. And the Mishnah Melech is medayek midivri Rabbeinu Nira, dechol machshava dekachim, havi afilu b'loy hoitzah b'peh. And he says, even though Rashi Shita and Tosfos Shita, and he's minor keruchel, all the Marmakomis that we just mentioned, is mavur that it has to be bedibur, but he says, Lanias daiti, if you want to know what the Shitas HaRambam is, the Shitas HaRambam is that this is something that would have to be or would only have to be b'machshava. Even without Eitzah's dibur b'peh, that would be enough in order for it to be a problem. In other words, we have a very fundamental machlokes rishonim regarding all the machshavas hapoisos by kachim. Is it dafka b'dibur or is it afilu b'machshava? It could be, and again, it's more pashut than pashut. This shaila would seem to be totally in the two mekayros that we have in Chazal and in the Rishonim for why it is that if somebody does an avodah with a bad machshav, it's going to be a problem. The Gemara in Mesechtes Zvachim Dav Chavtes Amid Beis says, Amar Rabbi Yanai, Minai l'mechashav b'kachim shulaika. How do you know that if somebody has a bad machshava by kachim, he gets malchus? Talmud Loimar, it says in the Torah, Lo yichashev. And from Lo yichashev, we know you get malchus. Right, the Gemara, you get malchus for Lo yichashev, it's a lav she'en by maisa. V'chol lav she'en by maisa ein loikin olav. So the Gemara says, you're right, Rabbi Yanai meant, I'll leave it to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds lav she'en by maisa loikin olav. According to him, you would get malchus. But the Gemara says, what is the makar? That if someone has a machshava peiselis, you over a loisase, and according to Rabbi Yehudi, would even get malchus. It's because it says in the Torah lo yichashev. Now the truth is, if you look at the pshutei shel mikra, if you look at the pasuk in Avenik, that says lo yichashev, Rabbi Yanai's understanding of lo yichashev is very much being moitze mikra midei pshutai. The pasuk lo yichashev is said in Parshas Sav, in the parish of the Shlomim, right? So we spoke about this. In Parshas Vayikra, the Torah introduces all the karbanos, and then in Parshas Tzav, the Torah rounds off a lot of the halachas that weren't mentioned in Parshas Vayikra. Zois Torahs this, Zois Torahs that. So this is in the parasha of Zois Torahs Zevach HaShlomim, right? The Shlomim is always referred to as Zevach HaShlomim. V'zois Torah Zevach HaShlomim. So one of the halachas is as follows. The Torah says, Ve'im hei'achel van ye'achel mipsar Zevach Shlom b'yem hashlishi. And really it starts a pasuk earlier. The pasuk says that if somebody brings a carbon shlomim, so you have 2 days and a night to eat it. If you have anything left over, by the third day, if you have to burn it. Zok the pasuk. Let's say you have leftover bas already on the third day. At that point, you can't get ritzoi. Hamakriv oisai, the person that brought it, the carbon will not be considered a good carbon on his behalf. Pigul yiyah, it's going to be disgusting. Any person that eats from it, he will have to bear his sin. Meaning he didn't get any kapara. To the contrary, he ended up doing a terrible avera by eating this basar. If you were learning pshutei shel mikra, you would almost be tempted to say, it sounds like what the Torah is saying is, if you bring a shlomim, and the shlomim is noisar, and you eat from the noisar, then retroactively it knocks out your carbon. Lo yeratze, hamakrivoisoi lo yichashev loy. In fact, pigul yid, the whole thing is disgusting, and because you ate the basar, avoynetisi, you're not going to be chayv nos. But the Gemara in Masechtes Zvachim says, can't be that's what the pasuk means. And the reason is because how could it be that at the time that the kohen did the shchita kabbalah ilachas rika, he got a ritzoy, and now 3 days later, all of a sudden, because you didn't eat the basar and now you did eat from it, now it has no havana. Must be that this pasuk means something completely different, and this pasuk is talking about in real time while the avodas are being done, and we're not talking about basa that was left over, but we're talking about a kohen who had a machshava to leave over the basa. So he had in mind to eat the basa, or then lo yiratz, you're not going to get ritzui. Then it's going to be pigul. But even in the drush of Chazal, which of course is the pshuta shel mikra, even in the drush of Chazal, when it says lo yichashev, all it means is that the carbon should not be considered your carbon. It's a little tricky, this pasuk, because Chazal took this pasuk and they said it's talking about a machshavas pigul. Chazal didn't get it from the words lo yichashev. Chazal got it because there's nothing else the pasuk could be referring to. In fact, even in the drush of Chazal, lo yichashev means it won't be nechshav as if you brought a carbon. Stating that, Amar Rabbi Yanai in Masechtes Zvachim Chavtes Amid Beis, Minai l'mechashev b'kadshim shehu loika, because it says lo yichashev. But it's Rabbi Yanai's chiddush. Again, we just have to understand what's going on here. Lo yichashev, we teach as if it would say lo yisoichal, or it would say lo yisirtzach, lo yichashiv. Thou shall not have a bad machshava. But the bottom line is, this is Rabbi Yanai's makar in the Gemara in Zvachim, Daf Chavtes on the days, that you're not allowed to have a machshava as pigol, and l'chura, for that matter, you're not allowed to have any machshava apiseles when it comes to kachim. But the truth is, there's another makar. The other makar is a pasuk, and this pasuk is in Parshas Shoftim. The pasuk over there says, "Lo sizbach l'Hashem Elokecha." You're not allowed to shecht l'Hashem Elokecha shor voseh asher yeh bo mum, that has a blemish. Kol davara, anything bad is a problem. Ki tayevas Hashem Elokecha, because if you're going to do this, it's a tayeva, it's mamash a disgusting thing. Parenthetically, it's good to speak this out. Ramban says that this pasuk was only said here with regards to shchita, right? Even though, really, the halacha is true, not only regarding shchita, it's true regarding the haktarah, it's true regarding all the avodas, right? So why did the Torah say lo yisnizbach? So says Ramban, I'm going to tell you why. Because this pasuk is talking to non-koyens. It's talking to zars. And the only avodah that's kosher b'zar is shchita ksher b'zar. And for that reason, the Torah says lo yisnizbach. Now the Ramban doesn't explain so much why this pasuk has to be talking about a zar. But if you look at the Ramban in his Akdama to Sefer Dvarim, in his Akdama to Mishnah Torah, the Ramban says that every single halacha that the Torah says in Sefer Dvarim is negeya non-kohanim. In fact, Ramban asks as a little bit of a kasha, how come Torah's kohanim wasn't ibig gechazit in Sefer Dvarim? Why don't we review the laws of Zvachim and Menachos in the same way that we review so many of the other halachas in the Torah? Says the Ramban, I'll tell you why. Because Kohanim's reason him. And if a Kohen hears something once, he doesn't have to hear it a second time. It's the rest of us that are foilish trick, right? Or we need to hear it again and again and again. And it's for that reason the Torah had a chazer over, and that's why there's a parasha Mishnah Torah. Zok the Ramban, it's so meduyik. Because the Torah over here wanted you to know, and the Torah said it dafka by shchita. You know why? Because shchita is the one element of a carbon that's ksher bizarre. V'akarev, says the Ramban, ki hichso azar azois ba'avur ha'yisraeli. It's dafkin again the Yisrael. Avol kohanim's reason musarim v'daya basra echas v'lokach le'hechser. It's for that reason the Torah was very careful in the way it spoke it out. And this is milu shitas. Ramban doesn't say that, but it's milu shitas. The Ramban is essentially telling you to what I wrote in the Hakdama. But either way, so this is talking dafka about shchita because it's only in the gay of the zar. So what does the Torah say? What could the zar not do? Lo yisizbach l'Hashem l'kach shar v'sash yeh b'imon. You can't shecht an animal that has a mum. Additionally, kol davara. You can't shecht an animal that has kol davara. So what does kol davara mean? So if you take a look at Rashi, azara lemefagel bekotchem al yedei dibura. This is an azara that you're not allowed to have a machshavas pigel al yedei dibura. I think it's pashat, by the way. I think it's pashat. We spoke about the Rambam a few dafin ago. The Rambam in Perek Ches Halacha Aleph in Hilchas Psuli HaMikdashim, where the Rambam says, "Kol mechashe machshava she'inu nechayne bekotchem, hareza over beloisase, she'arehu oimer lo yichashev, mipi hashmuel lamdu shebechlal din zeh shelo yafsir hakotchem b'machshava, she'areza doime," says the Rambam, lematul mum bekotchem. The Rambam says if someone has a bad machshava by kotchem, it's similar to being matul mum bekotchem. And we said that Ramesh Simcha Nar Sameach was very bothered with this lashon Rambam. What's the Rambam giving me a dumna magid's mashal? You should know it's doimel a matul mum bekotchem. What does that do a matul mum bekotchem? It's possible because the Torah says it's possible. It says lo yichashev. It says lo yichashev. So Ramesh Simcha said a hope shot that the Rambam's coming to tell me a chiddush that the only time you're able lo yichashev is if the machshava actually renders the carbon puzzle, Pesach in chatos or minchas chayte and minchas kanos. But when it comes to a carbon where it's going to be kosher, elish lo yolo l'shem chayva, then you're not going to be able to isol lo yichashev. We said Rav Shalom David had a tesefta for this, but the bottom line is that gewaldige chiddush that Ramesh Simcha said. But where did the Rambam really get this from? Again, the Rambam is buying a chiddush la'alacha where Ramesh Simcha understands the Rambam. But where did the Rambam get it from? I think it's posh, and he got it from this pasuk. Lo yisizbach l'Hashem elokecha shor v'aseh asher yeh boy mum kol davara. The Rambam saw a pasuk that the Torah was makish pigel to mum. The Torah is putting them together. No mum and kol davara is like. It's pasha to me. This is where the Rambam got it. I didn't see anyone say it, probably because it's so pasha. See the Hakdam at the Mesilas Yesharim, right? So obvious this is where the Rambam got it from. But Al Kol Panim, Al Kol Oif, and we have two Mekairis. We have two Mekairis to this Inyan. We have two Mekairis that are not let to have a bad machshava by Kachem. One is learned out from Parashat Sav. It says Lo Yichashev in the Parashat Pigel. That Rabbi Yanni was Mechadish is a loisa, so you're not allowed to have a bad machshava. And the second one is in Parashat Shoiftim. Lo Yisizbach Lashem Elokecha Ashiyah by Mum Kol Davara, and Zokt. This is free, as quoted by Rashi. Azora lemefagel bekotchem al yedei dibura. One makar says machshava, the other makar says dibur. I think it's pashat. These two shittas that we find over here, the shita of Rashi and Tosfos, that a machshava in kachem has to be bedibur, and the shita of the Rambam that as long as it's machshava is enough, which seem to boil down to the two makaris that we have as it relates to what the makar is to the iser. If the makar is lo yichashev, means machshava. If the makar is kol davar ra, means dibur ra, then l'chayr would have to be bedibur. Now at the end of the day, we have to reconcile it. Is it machshava is bedibur? Rashi and Tosfos pick dibur, the Rambam pick machshava. Again, that's already for another conversation maybe. But the bottom line is, I think it's pashit that the two shitas that you find in the Rishonim are rooted in the two drushes, in the two sources, in the two mekayres that you find to the idea of a machshava hapoiseles be'kachim.